All right, y'all, this is a new SEC podcast, and we're back giving you a quick Week 9 preview, kind of focusing on 5 themes, 5 questions we had coming out of this week. A lot of stuff going on the field, off the field, in the portal. Hunter, talk to me about this past week of football. What are your thoughts, and kind of get into these questions we came up here with?
Yeah, there's a ton of games this week. I mean, some really big ones, some really good ones. The Mississippi State-Texas game. Alabama going down to the wire with South Carolina after being 2-score favorites. Vanderbilt even more legit than we even expected. There's some quarterback shakeups on who's going to be playing going forward on certain teams with injuries. I mean, the biggest firing of the season just happened. So, like, this was a crazy week. It's like right around the time of the season where these kind of things happen because we're at the turn.
Yeah. We're at the turn here. And it was, like you said, it was a crazy week. I mean, like, I think the game of the week probably was that Alabama game, just in terms of how close it was, being able to pull out a gutty win there. And Texas A&M continued to show their dominance, definitely solidifying themselves in my number 1 spot for a power ranking piece.
Mm-hmm.
LSU having more cojones to let go of a coach than, say, Florida, who kind of deliberated over for a couple of years. Just shows the state of the program and what they expect there. And so it was a fun week of football. And, we came up with really like 5 questions that we kind of gathered watching the football this week. And so the first question was, who are the national championship contenders? We've seen 9 weeks of football, SEC versus the field. Who are the true national championship contenders in your mind?
Yeah. And I think it's the ones that are sitting in position to make the playoffs the best. It's Alabama A&M, who right now are poised for the SEC championship game, which would, get you there either way. You have Georgia and Ole Miss right there behind with 1 loss. There's a couple, other teams that fit that bill, but I'd say those are the 4 teams that have shown that they can win the big game, that could put together what I consider a string of games that the playoffs would require to beat multiple consistent opponents in a row. Alabama's done it. A&M has done it as well, had a gauntlet of teams. Ole Miss and Georgia, while they dropped one mid-season, they've still shown that they can string together some games.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you. And when I looked at the teams I put together that are in the SEC that can be national championship contenders and are national championship contenders, Alabama's definitely one of them. What they've shown us this season, being able to win and come behind games, being able to look, improved throughout the season week to week, deserves it. A&M's offense is humming. You also mentioned Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss offensively has enough to string 4 games. The way they're sitting right now, they probably would be playing in the first round. And then I'd also add Georgia. I think to this point, what they've been able to do, beating Tennessee, playing Alabama pretty close, beating Ole Miss, Georgia is definitely a team you do not want to see in the first round, potentially having to play over there in Sanford Stadium as well.
Yeah. And I think the bigger question behind it is like, the ones that maybe are not contenders, but are poised to still make a run at it. Like, why do we doubt Vanderbilt at this point? I think it's a hard team to play. However, I don't see them in that same level with those other 4 teams. If they were to be playing tougher competition, I think I feel that same way about Texas. I don't think that they're that strong of a team. I think that their rank is, up for debate to even be a ranked team. Tennessee showing some vulnerability. So, really, I do see Vanderbilt sitting right there at that 5 spot, but the other 4 being really the premier ones.
I agree with you there. And I think what's different about those top 4 is that we haven't seen them play. The top 4 have kind of played each other in some ways, and we've seen them play some of the other teams in the SEC that are ranked, right? So we just saw Ole Miss play Oklahoma. We've seen Texas play Oklahoma. Both those teams are kind of outside of that top 4, still ranked, still in a spot where they can make the SEC championship, still in a spot where they can play themselves into the playoffs, but not necessarily in that top 4 Mount Rushmore, we'll say, of the SEC when it comes to making the playoffs. What's good is we saw last year Notre Dame made the playoffs playing in the first round, and Ohio State made the playoffs playing in the first round. So you don't necessarily have to win the SEC to be a national championship winner or contender. In the field, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Group of 5, any contenders you see there that really stand out?
Above the obvious ones, like the Ohio States, the Indianas, the potentially Oregons, I do think that there's still things yet to be seen with some of the Big 12 teams. it's still open there for me. Like, will Texas Tech be able to continue having, they had the quarterback injury, they had the backup, now injury. So like we've seen some weird stuff there. Georgia Tech hasn't necessarily shown yet that they can win a big game. They've won everything they needed to up to this point, but they'll have the opportunity to prove that. So outside of the obvious ones, I think there's a lot that are going to have the opportunity to prove it at the big stage before it. That will, I don't think there's any that are going to be like fringe like last year where we're debating if they're a good team. I think that everyone has a good opportunity this year to show it.
I definitely agree with you there. And just based upon our conversation, like I think 12 is the right number of teams to get in. You could argue honestly less. And I would say I think Georgia Tech is the one outlier when you have a coach like Brett Key, when you have a guy like their quarterback who's got 12 touchdowns in the season, third in the ACC in rushing. I think that they can potentially make a run in the playoffs. I'm not saying national championship. I could see them get into the semifinals. And in the Big 12, I guess it'll kind of settle itself out, whether it's BYU, whether it's Texas Tech, whether it's even Houston, where I went to school. But I think from who I've seen play, I think it's BYU or Texas Tech. So just wanted to kind of talk about where we see national championship contenders and kind of who could be in that overall realm. Second question we have for y'all: most impressive Week 9 performance in the SEC from what we saw this past week. Hunter, thoughts there?
A&M has got to be the one. I mean, I knew that they had the opportunity to win this game. I think a lot of people took them, but then we're still doubting necessarily the big win capability that they had. It's the most impressive 24-point win on the road in Death Valley, shook up the entire landscape of coaching. But I'm going to put Mississippi State as a close second from an impressive standpoint. They didn't win, but man, I mean, they've had a couple games where they really should have. And I am impressed with what this team can do. And when they have some matchups on their schedule going forward, we start to maybe look at those differently when they're going to be playing, a team like Georgia or something down the road that they might be able to upset. Ole Miss too.
Yeah, I feel like we've been agreeing on a lot of the points here. I think definitely Texas A&M, only undefeated SEC team to this point, and just the way they went into Baton Rouge and how hard it is to win in Death Valley, they left no doubt. And Marcel Reed is continuing to build a Heisman campaign. He looks incredible on the ground. I mean, Casey Concepcion returning a touchdown as well. Like this team, it's got a little bit of 2019 LSU to it. Just the swagger, the skill positions at each side of the ball. The defense is mean and nasty. So super impressed with what they can do and what they've done. I think I would say as well, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss going to the road, bouncing back from a tough road loss. Trinidad Chambliss looked unfazed, being able to get that 10-point lead and hold it in that game. I was impressed with what I saw from Trinidad Chambliss. I was impressed from the coaching that I saw from Lane Kiffin. And this Ole Miss team is kind of in a good spot to cruise into the playoffs from what it looks like if they can avoid getting tripped up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, they have the potential for sure. And Chambliss is that guy. Like, there's no question about it at this point. We saw Austin Simmons like very, very briefly in the game, but it's Chambliss's team.
Definitely Chambliss's team. But like I said, I'm not sleep on Mississippi State. Like they could definitely win the Egg Bowl. Like if you're an Ole Miss fan watching this, like I'm gonna stand on that. I think they could win the Egg Bowl. Mississippi State is definitely not a slouch team in the SEC, and they've looked just about in every game besides Texas A&M to this point in conference play.
For sure. Third question here.
Let's get it.
You pose this one, we'll look at both sides of it. Who is the maybe most overrated team in the SEC and who's being underrated right now? Who isn't being talked about enough? First, who's the most overrated to you?
Yeah, I would say the most overrated to me to this point is Tennessee. Tennessee has been kind of talked a lot about because I think their brand, I think the offense looks very explosive. It's one of the best in the country. I've hyped up Tennessee several times. When I think about being number 14 in the country, I'm wondering, who have you beat to this point, right? You're behind Texas Tech. You're ahead of a Cincinnati team. And really, in terms of conference wins, you went down the wire to Mississippi State. You should have beat Georgia, but you didn't. I'm just not impressed with their resume to this point. They have a great opportunity to improve the resume, beating Oklahoma, but I think Tennessee, to me, is the most overrated team in the SEC to this point.
Quarterback play is great. I mean, the receivers are great, but when they're giving up over 32 points a game, second most in the SEC, to me, that's what keeps them out of any conversation of being a legitimate contender. You gave up 34 points to Kentucky. No team's done that in years. So it's where I see this Tennessee team being kind of middle of the pack. So I think they're definitely the most overrated to me as well. I don't think there's any other team that's really out of that. Now, underrated side, just that for me to talk about them again, it's Mississippi State. The overtime loss here, the heartbreaking loss to Florida with a terrible interception that Blake Shapen threw when they were in field goal range and down 2. They've put themselves in a lot of situations to win games, and it hasn't come to fruition. And I think that's what's keeping them out of any conversation of being talked about to the level that they really deserve. I mean, they're underdogs against Arkansas. We'll talk about that in our previews, but I think they're being underappreciated a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in the sentiment that they've been underappreciated to this point this season. And we've talked about it in lengths, how many close losses they've had, the type of wins they've had, just really unfortunate losses to Florida, really unfortunate loss even this past week. And so I agree with Mississippi State. I'm gonna throw a curveball. It's gonna upset you. I might say Auburn. I would say one of the most underrated teams in the SEC at this point, I would say, is Auburn, just given what they've shown us defensively against Arkansas, one of the few teams to be able to slow them down, forcing 3 interceptions from Taylor Green. I'm not saying they're going to win a ton of games for the rest of the season, but they're playing Vandy. They're playing, obviously, Kentucky this week. Like, their defense is enough to trip teams up, and I think they could have a chance to get another win before the season ends here.
I think so as well. And now we see the quarterback change kind of it revitalize some of the offensive what they're looking to do on offense with the forward pass at least being a part of the game plan. Yeah, they're a different team. I think that they're underrated to the potential that they can be if they're playing well. I'm not going to give them enough credit for. I'm not going to give them too much credit for what they've done up to this point because
there's nothing to
it's
credit.
been ugly. And honestly, if there wasn't so many coaches being fired, that they would probably do it. I think that they're stuck because of the amount of jobs that are open to where they know that they're not going to get one of the premier options. So that's kind of where they're handcuffed to freeze. But that's another conversation around coaches. One of the main happening in the country.
Yeah, and we'll get to that here. And I agree with you. It is a tough spot with this coaching carousel and what's happening. And so I guess that takes us to the fourth question. So, who do you think can get knocked out of the playoff race this week? So it's kind of a preview to our previews if you're watching the video to this point, because we'll be previewing the Week 10 games in the SEC. But to repeat the question, who do you think can get knocked out of the playoff race this week?
I think that there's 2 SEC teams that can get knocked out this week. And it will happen with 2 teams getting knocked out. First is the loser of Tennessee and Oklahoma. Neither of those 2 teams have done enough to show that they could be a 3-loss option. We saw it with South Carolina, Ole Miss last year that deserves some recognition and conversation. I don't think that these 2 are there yet with their resume to be a 3-loss team in conversation. So the loser of that game, and then I'm going to say the loser of the Texas and Vanderbilt game is kind of sitting right there. Like, obviously Texas then becomes a 3-loss team, but does a 2-loss Vanderbilt, where do they sit then in the conversation from a resume standpoint?
Yeah, I think a 2-loss Vanderbilt, now you're kind of in that league with the Notre Dames with 2 losses. You're in that league with potentially the Big 12 champ and maybe whoever loses in the Big 12 championship. Say it's BYU and Texas Tech or someone who's only got 1 loss, and they BYU loses. Now the Big 12 gets 2 teams. I agree with you. Vanderbilt still has to win out at least going up until Tennessee to be able to kind of cement that 4th or 5th playoff spot. I think that outside the SEC, Miami's kind of in a dangerous spot playing SMU this week. SMU could potentially give them a 2nd loss, which would certainly hinder their chances to make the playoffs because now you're deeper in the ACC standings and you don't have a chance to be able to play in the championship to get a guaranteed spot in the playoffs as well. Last question kind of ties to all the action going on with the coaching carousel. We saw Lane Kiffin today on the Pat McAfee show. So, we want to know, we're going to talk about it, and we'd love to see some comments here on it. Who's the ideal coach for LSU and Florida right now in the SEC?
LSU is the better job. It's the more premier job in my eyes. You see more players that are sticking behind LSU as a program as opposed to riding for the coach, which people want to go play at both of these 2 schools. I think LSU is just a better situation. I think both of these schools are looking for a head coach. I know I see a lot of different coordinators that are maybe in the conversation for it. Joe Brady coming back to LSU from the Bills. I think you're looking for a head coach. You're looking for a slam dunk. I think for Florida, Golish isn't a slam dunk that they need. I think there's really two options for a slam dunk there, and it's Kiffin or Freeman, and I'm not sure that either of those are going to go to Florida. LSU probably has a better shot, but I think that I think LSU maybe ends with Summerall.
Okay, I like the Summerall pick. I was gonna say something along the lines of Summerall. I agree with you. LSU is the better job, and LSU's had the more recent championship success. LSU NFL wise is dominating the league. So you look at who they produce, what that state produces, how well they're able to kind of keep those players in state. I was thinking about this question. It's going to pain me to say it, but I think Willie Fritz should be in the discussion for the LSU job. He's coached back-to-back FCS championships at Sam Houston State in Texas. He obviously brought Tulane to 2 back-to-back AAC championships, beat USC. He's done nothing but recruit Southeast Texas and Louisiana really well. He's 65 years old, but like he runs that Texas-Louisiana border very well. He wins at programs with less resources. You give him the resources of LSU, his wisdom. It's not a super charismatic hire, but it's a guy that clearly shows that players get behind him and he can rebuild programs and turn things around with less.
I like that. That's one I haven't been seeing too much about, and I don't think that's terrible. I think you're looking for me. I'm looking for a hire who's going to be strong for players to rally behind, who has some success. I think you have to have some head coaching experience for these two jobs because of the politics of the head coaching job today, where you don't have time to turn it around. You don't have time to figure out how to be a head coach. So, I think that both these two teams look at Jeff Brom out of Louisville, or you're looking at Brent Key, you're looking at Clark Lee, you're looking at some of these guys who are winning at programs with less resources. Not that could make that transition.
I like Brent Key at Florida. I think that's a good one, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hate James Franklin taking one of these jobs, or them poaching Drink. I mean, he's going to be in his own potential hot water with the whole quarterback situation he's facing at Mizzou down this stretch. But I think you're looking for someone who has some success. I could see Kiffin leaving. It would have to be for LSU. To me, I think Florida, you're out of the lottery there.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate spot for Florida there. And I think that this LSU firing is kind of keeping South Carolina, Arkansas, and Auburn at bay. I mean, I say Arkansas, even with having an interim, like they might consider keeping Petrino versus trying to find a coach in this cycle potentially. But it's definitely, I think, kind of controlling what Auburn does and what South Carolina potentially does as well at the coaching position. Just my thoughts. Obviously not fully affiliated, but any final thoughts as you wrap up the week 9 recap? We're here 19 minutes in.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be, just to finish on that, I think there's going to be a lot of weeks of speculation because all the coaches who are worth a hire here aren't going to do anything or make any noise until after the season. Almost all of them are contending in some way, shape, or form. So you won't hear anything. There's going to be weeks and weeks of speculation on it. So we'll keep tabs on it, but I think there's going to be no movement for a while.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. I mean, because all the top coaches are obviously still coaching right now. And so whether it's Summerall for one of these jobs, or Golish obviously losing last week to Memphis doesn't help, or, Willie Fritz from Houston, or some of these other guys that are coaching, I don't think it'll be Dan Lanning. We'll see who gets these positions. No. But, as always, we love watching college football. We love people that watch our channel, and so make it easy for yourselves to find our content. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's been a great season. It was a great week last week. Got another good week of football here. Game previews, game recaps. This is a new SEC podcast. We got Hunter Zeisman, Randall Jr. Until next time.